for thinking is connected to hypothalamus, which is the autonomic button which can bring a shift from the sympathetic to parasympathetic, parasympathetic to sympathetic. There are nuclei in the hypothalamus which can do that, and therefore cortex, the sensory cortex, which is allowing you to perform or get various sensory stimuli, when it perceives anything. Now I am sitting here and suddenly I see some snake coming through that door or window. I will perceive the snake, and perception of that snake will activate my sensory cortex. That cortex will be connected to my hypothalamus, hippocampus, limbic cortex, which will have a memory about snake. So then a memory is there that it is potentially life threatening. A snake can kill me. That information, when it goes to the hypothalamus, it triggers the flight or fight response. And what it will do? It will increase your heart rate, it will increase your blood pressure, it will increase the blood flow towards the skeletal muscles and reduce the blood flow towards the digestive and reproductive organs. It will increase the blood flow to the brain. It will allow your pupils to get dilated so that more light can enter and you can see more clearly what is happening. And it will also shun all the activities of digestion, micturition, defecation, everything will be closed. So you are ready to either fight with snake or run away from here. For that, you will require glucose. So your pancreas will release a lot of glucagon, which will allow the stored glucose in the form of glycogen in your liver and muscle to rush into your bloodstream. So you will have high sugar levels rushing up. You will have high blood pressure, and your muscles will get tensed. Your muscle will get ready for fight, and there will be increased blood flow to the brain and muscles and reduced blood flow to the GI tract. Now, once the snake is caught or it goes out, in 15-20 minutes, I will be able to relax again. And then if you again measure my blood pressure after 15 minutes, the blood pressure which has shooted from 120/80 baseline to 160, 100, 160, 120 during this stressful situation will once again be almost reaching the baseline in 20 minutes. So this is an acute stressor coming. I am responding to it. The stressor, I am relieved from it. It goes away and I relax. Fine. But what happens when a stressor becomes chronic? For example, the stressor for me is my boyfriend or my girlfriend. Okay. So what is happening is that we are in a stressful relationship now. There is a bad phase of relationship that is going on, and there are certain situations which we are avoiding, but we have to face them. Now, if there is such kind of situation, every minute my WhatsApp gets a message or any post that I get in social media which is hurting me, it will trigger the same threatful kind of response, threatful situation, because I will perceive it as potentially threatful situation. So like that, we are now exposed to lot of information and lot of demanding situations every moment. So I'm seeing a message, I'm dropping it, another I'm seeing a message. Now this stressor may not be always negative. If they are positive also, they lead to excitation. So say there is some message that is there in a group of individuals where your seniors are there, where your teachers are there, and somebody is messaging and you are very vigilant about those messages, then also you will see that your sympathetic activation takes place. So even if you are too much attached, positively also, it leads to palpitations. Even if you are negatively attached, you can feel that it leads to palpitations. So your brain, your nervous system does not differentiate whether it is a positive excitation or negative excitation. It will get excited. And when it gets excited, irrespective of the stimuli, whether it is a snake, whether it is your boyfriend, whether it is your father, whether it is your job, whether it is any kind of excitation, whether you got a big lottery, you earn some award, anything for the brain, it is a excitation, it is a stimulation, and it demands a reaction which will be done in the form of PNI. The sympathetic activation will take place and will affect the immune system. There are so many studies that show that sudden revelation of very good news also could lead to heart attacks. So now, in this kind of situation, the reduction of stress can take place probably by doing more physical activity, by performing certain breathing practices, by performing certain exercises, going for a jog. You can cut down those, you can allow your system to regain normalcy. But in this COVID situation, what is happening is that the media, the screen time itself is a demanding situation on your eyes, on your brain. Continuously, if you are exposed to this electromagnetic field, now I have written a couple of review articles, you can check on PubMed, that this electromagnetic field, if you are exposing yourself to this mobile phone directly on your ears, and it is the exposure is more than 30 minutes, then if you expose yourself like this continuously for a period of 5 years, then you increase the chances of developing frontal lobe glioma by 60 times. So it is, WHO has classified this mobile phone as a class 2B carcinogen. Okay, please search over the EMF field and its effect, because the brain directly absorbs these rays, and brain absorbs it more when your mobile phone is in low battery and when the signal is low. It can jump to 100,000 folds more radiations, because it draws those tower antenna radiations more powerfully, and that can be absorbed by your brain. So these are the kind of stressful situations we are in right now. And then what is happening is that the momentary excitation of sympathetic nervous system, which used to happen in certain stressful situation and used to come back to normal, is now happening every minute. Before your system would come to normal, that it takes 20 minutes for the relaxation response to set in. Once you are excited, it takes 20 minutes for the parasympathetic to come over and take over the sympathetic. But before the parasympathetic can take over, in 20 minutes, you have 100 more stimuli. You have 100 more demanding situations. So what is happening is that the graph is not getting a time to come down. It is going up and up. Sleep was a major factor which could bring it back down. But now all of us know this, that our mind is not switching off in nights. It runs in the day, it keeps running in the background in the night. And your brain does not differentiate whether it is a thought or whether it is an event actually happening in front of you. So there was a study where the runners, the sprint runners, they put EMG leads and also put the FNIRS machine on the brain to see the activation of the brain. And they told them, okay, you close your eyes. They were sitting relaxed. They were just sitting relaxed. They told them, close your eyes. Now imagine yourself. You are in the Olympic race. You are on the sprint. Get ready. On your marks. Get set. And there was a sound. Go. And all the muscles which are required for running showed a EMG spike. And the brain was activated, and they actually ran in their imagination. And when the scans were taken, it was not possible to differentiate the scans of the people who would actually running or who were imagining that they were running. Similarly, there are studies where a person is looking at a tree from bottom to top, and it shows different areas of the brain getting activated when the person looks at the tree from the bottom to top. And then the person closes the eyes and imagines seeing a tree in the same way that he saw actually before, from bottom to top. And the scan shows exactly the same activation, so much that you are not able to differentiate which scan is of the person who is imagining and which is the scan of a person which is actually seeing the tree. So your brain cannot differentiate between an event actually happening or you imagining it. So my request to all of you is, there is no problem if you do certain actions, but when you keep repeating those actions again and again in your mind 1,000 times, 100 times, you do the greatest harm to your system. You generate a lot of inflammatory cytokines in your body, which will eventually lead you into problem. So the problem is not in getting exposed in some stressful situation one time or other time. The problem is when you repeat those excitations again and again in your mind, and you allow this circle to go deeper and deeper into your physiology. It is then that you will realize that at the age of 33, at the age of 30, young people are coming to us with their high blood pressure, which is not coming down. Sugar levels are rising at the age of 30. Cases are coming to Narayan Hridayalaya with MI, myocardial infarctions. The problem which would happen at the age of 60 and beyond is coming at the age of 30 now. Why? The tremendous amount of speed of the mind, tremendous exposure. There is a storm of information and stimuli that is entering into your brain every minute. So many WhatsApp groups, Facebook, Instagram. Now your brain is not getting a respite. One stimulation after another, one after another. It has gained a tremendous speed. All of us will agree that there is a storm that is going on within our brains. We cannot sit still. We have to keep shaking our legs. We have to keep moving. We are so restless. Now this is calling for a problem in future. In fact, this awareness itself will help you a lot. Are you able to see the speed that has set into you? See, what is the problem with speed? What is the problem with speed? Everybody wants to be fast. Everybody wants to do multiple tasking. Everybody wants to be cognitively sharp. But this is what we understand as Abhimanyu syndrome. What is Abhimanyu syndrome? Abhimanyu syndrome means that you know how to intellectually tear a thing apart, how to go into the very depth of discussion. Nobody can beat you in debate. You go to the very depth of any issue that you take up. And you have sharpened your memory, because that is what our education system taught us till now. There is a sharp memory. There is the ability to intellectually tear things apart. There is the ability to go to the very depth. There is that wit. There is that knowledge. There is that information in Google. Everywhere there is information. And with that, we have developed a ability that we can go to the depth of any issue. And we have become excessively critical in our analysis. We want everything to be analyzed critically now. Everything that comes in front of the modern student now over the globe, student uses his intellect to critically analyze it. And this analysis, this ability to analyze, critically use your buddhi, is like a double-edged sword. All of us know how to go in, but none of us knows how to come out. Abhimanyu knew how to pierce the Chakravyuh and go right into the center, but he did not know how to come out of the Chakravyuh. Now the same brain, the same intellect, which has given you the sensitivity and ability to become the topper of your batch, the same intellect binds you, hurts you 100 times more than other person whenever you get hurt sensitively, emotionally. Because you will not be able to let go. We have grown a lot intellectually, but emotionally, we are not able to handle things. Anger outbursts, all of us have it. Irritability, inability to tolerate failures of others, inability to forgive and forget. So so much pain we are undergoing because of this habit that our brain has developed, the habit of inability of letting go, the habit of critically analyzing everything. See, we critically analyze things, we judge things, we apply that in arenas where they are not required. For example, definitely when you are doing some research, you have to do the critical analysis. When you are performing or writing some paper, you have to do that. But when it comes to relationships and you start judging your partner in every small thing, you see, okay, I have better options, there is that fellow is this good, that fellow is that good, and then every small thing becomes so big for you. You start critically analyzing your parents, you start critically analyzing your in-laws. So then what happens is, everywhere you will see that you are not able to sustain relationships in life. There is a story where 3 daughter-in-laws recently got married and they came into a family, a traditional family. The first daughter-in-law was 12th pass. She did not do graduation. She wanted always to be a housewife. She got into the family, she became housewife. And then she went into this new family. She was able to accept everybody. She did not have very strong notions of herself. She was able to accept everybody, and then she took her mother-in-law, father-in-law as her own parents. She accepted the other family members as her own family members and gelled with the family very nicely. After a year or so, the second son got married. He got married with a lady who had completed her master's degree. Now this lady got married and found it little difficult to adjust with the family initially. She was little judgmental. Why this kind of things are there? Why this is not proper? Why there is no cleanliness? Why this there is my in-laws behaves like this? My father-in-law in front of everybody, why he talks like this? So that kind of problems were slowly there. Little bit initial hitches were there. Sometimes she went home, did not come back. They called her. Slowly both of them adjusted. Ultimately, when she got a child, she got that surrendering attitude as a mother. Then the child became the priority. Slowly she was able to sacrifice, and then she also slowly got adjusted into the family. The third son, who was a doctor, he himself wanted an educated wife. So he got a lady who was a MD, MD lady, who had a doctoral degree, who had done the thesis work, who had guided some students. So she was a faculty in an institute. She got married. Now this lady, when she came, she found it extremely difficult to adjust. As a person, as a doctor, she was taught to look things critically, to analyze things critically, cut things apart, look at the very basis, look at the very cause, guide her students, critically see their thesis, see where is wrong, present journal clubs where she has to critically analyze a paper. So when she developed this kind of ability of critically analyzing everything, she was not aware that what she is doing in her family at her in-laws place is just analyzing everybody critically, being judgmental about everybody around her. She had comments for everybody. And ultimately, this lady with a doctoral degree, which we will call as the cream of the society, was not able to sustain her marriage and separated. So the cream of the society is not able to sustain within society. I'm telling you this because as a new generation, when we come up, we only look at our left brain. We only value our left brain and we keep developing it. The left brain is the analytical brain. But then all of us also have a right brain. The right brain is an artful brain. It is an emotional brain. It is a sensitive brain. It is the brain which is non-judgmental, childlike. So this imbalance, I want all of you to become aware of in your life, and all of us should develop this saying from our ancient texts. When Patanjali says yoga chitta vritti nirodha, Or when Yoga Vasishtha says, Manah Prashamana Upayah Yoga, it means that yoga is a trick to switch on and switch off the particular areas of the mind whenever they are required. Critical analysis is required when you are sitting as a teacher, as a guide, seeing a MD or PhD thesis. It is required when you are actually doing a case discussion, when you are presenting a case or you are treating a patient. But when you go back to your family, when you are with your loved ones, when you are in a relationship with someone, when you are with your parents, you have to switch off your analytical brain. You have to become completely non-judgmental. Everybody will have some flaws and some advantages. Ultimately, what matters is at emotional level, how open you are, how you accept the other person as the person is. And this is the only thing, this ability to forgive, forget, let go, and move on will only give you quality relationship in your life. And a life where you will remain isolated, alone, without friends, without the social connects, will be no life at all. Whatever great position you may achieve in your life, however, whatever amount of money you may be able to earn in your life, if you are not able to cherish relationships, there is no life. So this is one aspect of mental health which I wanted to discuss with you about the COVID-19, that the brain, which is already getting so many stimuli in this particularly last 3 months, has been exposed to screen much more than before, because you are not able to go out. What you will do? Mobile only you have to catch. What else? So mobile, stimulation, and the electromagnetic radiations. Both of them are exciting your brain, and therefore the brain, when sustained sympathetic activity continues, there is a release of adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline is released because of there are direct sympathetic nerve fibers which open up in adrenal medulla, and they allow the adrenaline to be released directly into the bloodstream from adrenal medulla. And cortisol is released through the hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis from the adrenal cortex. So it is the ACTH released from the pituitary gland, and then that ACTH goes to the adrenal cortex and releases cortisol. Now, adrenaline and cortisol, when they are circulating in the blood, there are receptors for these two chemicals on your T cells. T cells are responsible for cell-mediated immunity. And when these chemicals attach on T cells, they undergo apoptosis. They degenerate and die. This is a proven pathway. So your immunity goes down. There is a research that was done on college students where two groups of students were exposed to a virus. It was a common cold virus, rhinovirus. Drops were there, which was put on the nostrils of the students, and then the students were randomly divided into two groups. One group of students was asked to go for a vacation, go for a holiday trip. Other group of students was asked to remain confined and undergo a surprise test, exam of all the subjects. They underwent. What do you think would have happened? Can anybody unmute and tell me what do you think would have happened? Which group of students would have got more cases immediately when they came back?
The students who were sent for exams.
Okay. So when they analyzed the data, they found that immediately after the exam and immediately after the vacation, it was a 5-day vacation and 5-day exam. Immediately when they got the data, they found that the people who went for an outing developed significantly more number of cases than the exam ones. Okay, now this is little puzzling. They took another data again after 5 days. So there were 3 time points, one at baseline, one after exam and one 5 days after exam or vacation. So in the first time point, they saw that the people who went for outing, they had some slightly higher number of cases than the exam ones. But then when they took the data after 10 days, then much more people who underwent exam developed common cold than people who went for an outing. They completely recovered. Now, what does it suggest is that when there is a stressor actually present, your immune system reacts and tries to fight it with all the might. So there was a spike in the response which continued for 5 days. It was using all the available resources to sustain and go through the exams. And the day exam got over, the immune system gave up. And then they became ill. Whereas the other group, they went to outing, there was more air exposure, and also in spite of that, some people got it and they recovered. And after 5 days, none of those people developed any kind of infection. They were able to come out. So this is how your immune system reacts. It is not exactly at the time of the stressor. Once that stressor comes and sustains for a while, and then as soon as it goes, or otherwise if it is continuing for a longer time, then you will collapse. So if for example the exam would have continued for 10 continuous days, then they would have collapsed in between. But then this amount of time duration was sufficient for their immune system to sustain. And then once the exam was over, they collapsed. So I'm giving this example just to emphasize on the relationship of your mind with your immune system. Okay. So now what we are going through is a sustained period of high cortisol, high adrenaline. And I'm telling you, if you are not adopting any measures of reducing this stress every day, you are reducing in your immunity. Your T cells, especially the CD4 and CD8 T cells, these T cells actually follow two kind of paths. Okay, you can search these pathways. Okay, so there is a pathway where you see that there is a type 1 pathway and there is a type 2 pathway. So what happens is that this cortisol allows them to go more through the type 2 pathway, where they undergo apoptosis and there is more inflammatory cytokine release. Whereas in pathway 1, there is more anti-inflammatory. Here there are more pro-inflammatory cytokines. So this is a proven pathway now. Pro-inflammatory cytokines are IL-1, IL-12, interleukins. They are all the one which will generate inflammation in your body. So now the recent researches are showing that all the psychiatric disorders, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, all are chronic inflammatory disorders. Can you believe it? You read in pathology, inflammation is generated by, there should be either autoimmunity or some foreign pathogen. But now modern psychiatry, up-to-date psychiatry says depression is a inflammatory disorder, a chronic inflammatory disorder. Why? Interleukins, inflammatory cytokines are more, immunity is less. So the distinction between mind and body is now thinning out. Every thought of agitation is generating inflammation in your body, which is compromising your immunity. Still, calm, relaxed mind is the best thing that you can do for your immunity. And for this, there is no better tool than yoga. So yoga works at all the levels on this PNI axis. From the cortex, it allows you to have a higher level of thinking. It allows you to develop counter thinking. There are thought patterns that Patanjali gives. Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekshanam, Sukha, Dukkha, Punya, Punya. So such kind of bhavanat pratisadhanam. So in various kind of dealings, what kind of mental attitudes you should have. So to a person who is friendly, Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, you should have these 4 kind of attitudes. So cognitively, yoga tells, whenever you see somebody who is happy around you, become friendly to him. What attitude you should have? You should become friendly. Second, he says, whenever you see somebody dukhi, somebody suffering, what attitude you should have? You should have karuna, maitri, karuna. Sukha, dukkha. If somebody is sukhi, you become his friend. If somebody is dukhi, have compassion. Then mudita, towards punya. If somebody is doing a noble thing, if somebody is doing a virtuous act, if some of your friend has started yoga sessions free for people during quarantine, then you should do mudita. Mudita is praise him. Be bold. Don't be shy in praising whatever good activity that you observe around yourself. That will give you peace of mind. If somebody is helping someone, if somebody is donating food to dogs, if somebody is giving food to a beggar, even if you cannot give, you praise that person. Praise in front of everyone. Don't be shy. Mudita for punya and upeksha for apunya. Wherever you see negativity, wherever you see people who are doing what they should not do, if you cannot do anything, just ignore it. Okay, if there is nothing in your hand to do about it, you think first, can I do anything about it? If your mind says nothing, then forget it, see as if it does not exist. Because there is no point. If you cannot do anything about it, then worrying about it. Upeksha. So if you develop these kind of 4 attitudes in your mind for the situations around you, you will see that a lot of positivity is entering into your life and your tendencies of getting agitated are coming down. Even in social media, when you see good things and you praise them, it will generate positive chemicals in your body. But now what we do in social media, whatever negative comes, it gains our attraction first. Whatever that is creating a panic, it gains our attraction first. And that is what we do the mudita. We spread it. And anybody does anything good, we feel shy of praising him. So we are bold in spreading negativity and we are shy in praising positivity. Patanjali is requesting us to do the opposite. Ignore negativity. Do not forward such messages. Do not bombard social media with anything panicky. Whereas if you see anything positive, circulate more. So cognitively, yoga works at the mind level. Yoga works physiologically by balancing the prana, by balancing the autonomic nervous system. So Telles et al.'s work, if you see, 15 minutes of left nostril breathing or right nostril breathing is able to bring the blood pressure by 10 mmHg systolic and 4 mmHg diastolic down if you do left nostril breathing. So there is a direct impact of the breathing on the autonomic nervous system. So you are cutting the sympathetic activation there and reducing cortisol and adrenaline directly by doing slow breathing pranayamas. In fact, when we have done some HRV studies where we are finding that even Bhastrika, the fast breathing practices, during the practice there is activation, but immediately after the practice, it goes much down and there is a deep sympathetic activity that continues for a time. In fact, I have personally found that performing Kapalabhati, Bhastrika is much more relaxing than directly going for a slower breathing practice. So using those breathing practices, using chantings, performing asanas. Number of studies have shown that GABA levels in the brain can be increased. GABA is a relaxing chemical for the brain. When it goes low, you become anxious. So yoga is working at the physiological level, at the pranic level, at the mind level. There are deeper discussions in various texts. You see Bhagavad Gita, you see Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. So all these are very much relevant in today's time. So with this background, I have prepared you for my presentation sufficiently. Now I will be more technical and little fast. So here you see these are, this is a review article published in 2020 where Rajkumar et al. Has shown that 28% of the subjects reported stress, anxiety and depression. 28% means out of every 10%, 3 are depressed, anxious or stressed around us. Suicidal tendencies are increasing. Now, need not to say about the recent case of SSR. People say that he was alone, he was isolated, he was not able to communicate to anybody, and then he developed such kind of mental state that he ended his life. Now, these are some cases which are getting reported because they are high profile people, but then in the ground situation, people are under a lot of panic. In hospital itself, people are committing suicide because they have been diagnosed positive or their relative has been diagnosed positive. So many percentage of people are coming out successfully. They are not dying, but then suicide itself has become another problem in this panic due to COVID-19. So this is another study which I was telling you, another study which I was telling you that the effect of stress on the immune system. This study by Ikovics et al. And Lesserman et al., if you see, depression, 38% greater decline in CD4 T cells compared with men. HIV positive people, the T cells are their life. These people, when they are becoming depressed, as compared to those who are non-depressed, the CD4 positive T cell count was 30% low. Similarly, people who were depressed progressed from HIV positive to AIDS and died early as compared to those who were non-depressed. So there is no other disorder where immunity plays an important role than HIV. And this immunity is playing a very important role in COVID also. So stress is a very, very important factor. All of you are aware about yoga. Yoga started as a mystical science, only as a spiritual, strictly spiritual discipline restricted to few seekers who would go to Himalayas, meet some gurus, and they would learn certain kriyas and techniques. That was yoga some 30 years before. But then, especially in the last 2 decades, yoga has come out of Himalayas and now it has become a global phenomena. And why it has become a global phenomena? Why the whole world is practicing yoga now? It means that there is something in yoga, and that something is its ability to calm down the mind and reduce the stress. Speed of the mind and stress have become the major burning problems of the humanity at present. So this is the definition which comes from the Vedas. Yoga unites. It unites now. When we are all together, yoga has become a platform where all of us are getting connected. In fact, my discussion with you now also is a Jnana Yoga. And this is how we are getting connected. So it connects first one soul to another soul, and then the individual soul with the universal soul. And you look at briefly the history of yoga. First mention of the word yoga is observed in the Rig Veda. In fact, the shloka of the IDY that comes, that particular shloka is coming from Rig Veda. That Manamsi, Janatam, that kind of that shloka that comes. In Vedas, yogic understanding was mainly philosophical, where it was all related to the Mahavakyas, who am I, Aham Brahmasmi, and that kind of stories. It was a direct jump using only the cognitive aspect of yoga. But then later people realized that such direct jump may be possible only for a very few, but others may require more systematic practice. So then came the sage Patanjali in 400 BC, and he consolidated the whole knowledge base of yoga and laid down a very systematic 8-limbed path. But Patanjali's approach also was predominantly focusing on meditation and mind. In fact, in whole Patanjali's Yoga Sutra of 196 aphorisms, you find only 3 sutras related to asana, and there is not a mention of a single asana. Only thing he has said is Thiram Sukham Asanam. Then he says Prayatna Shaithilyam Ananta Samapatti Bhyam. Drop your effort and expand your consciousness. And then he says Tato Dvandva Anabhigataha. If you do that, you will go beyond the forces of duality, beyond pleasure and pain, hot and cold. This is the only thing Patanjali has spoken about asana. But our present understanding about yoga is asana only. Almost whole of the Western world understands yoga as a physical exercise. You can see how it has been reduced in its capacity. Then came Hatha Yoga, where people realized that even Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga may be too advanced and you need a lower level preparation to even get ready for Patanjali. So they said, we will focus only on 2 limbs from the 8 limbs given by Patanjali. So they said, we will focus on the asana and pranayama and the kriyas. So then came the Hatha Yoga of Swatmarama, though he has also mentioned meditations and other aspects in his Hatha Yoga Pradipika. But his predominant focus became the pranayama and the asanas. Then 1893, Swami Vivekananda is the first person who took yoga to the West. Followed by him went Swami Paramahamsa Yogananda, who took Kriya Yoga. Then Maharshi Mahesh Yogi propagated transcendental meditation. Swami Kubalyananda deserves a special attention because he is the first yogi to start systematic scientific research on yoga. He started a yoga journal in 1929, where nobody could even believe that yoga can become a therapeutic discipline. His earlier papers in 1920s are there, where he has assessed the negative pressure in the abdomen generated by the practice of Kapalabhati, the level of various kind of markers, biomarkers in the urine of the patients after performing various kriyas. Kuvalyananda is known as the father of research in yoga. And then the Iyengar took the yoga and popularized it in West in the form of a practice, which was a physical practice. The asana aspect only was popularized, and it was correct by Iyengar also to popularize that aspect, because in those times, West was gross enough only to understand the grossest limb of yoga only. But probably now the West also is opening up and wants to go towards the subtler aspect of yoga, and I see a greater interest in the US population in mudras, subtle energies, pranayamas, bandhas. So this is how yoga has evolved from the Rig Veda to the current understanding of yoga as only asanas. Popularly, if you see, there are these 2 schools of yoga that are popular. One is the school that focuses on all the aspects of yoga. This is known as the integrated yoga. And another that focuses only on the physical aspect, which is known as the Hatha Yoga. The A is more popular in the Eastern countries, whereas the B, Hatha Yoga, is more popular in the Western countries. If you look at the research designs, they are also different. Usually in Western countries, they would like to do yoga only on weekends. Number of papers you will see where only once a week yoga session has been given or twice a week has been given. Whereas in Eastern studies, people like to do yoga every day, and most of the studies show at least 5 days a week kind of yoga intervention. And probably that is the reason that the effect size of yoga studies are much higher in Eastern population as compared to Western population. In fact, Kramer et al., they published a systematic review, and they said that they concluded that there is a bias. Eastern studies are more likely to report positive effects of yoga than the Western studies. Especially studies done in India are more likely to report only positive results. So there is a publication bias. That kind of thing was concluded by Kramer. That may be true, but then another factor which is there is that we teach yoga every day. And probably that is the reason that we get more positive results than the Western studies. This is the most famous definition of yoga And by this definition, I once again want to point this out, that yoga is principally a discipline which focuses on the mind. Yoga is termination of the agitations of the mind. All of you are aware of these 8 limbs of yoga, and the yamas and niyamas have become so relevant now. You see, Shaucha has become a major principle for protection against COVID-19. Santosha is what we have to show in this lockdown period. We are all understanding that we should not do hoarding, we should not do over shopping. Aparigraha is there. We should surrender to a higher principle and do more introspection. So all the limbs of yoga have gained a renewed, you can say, relevance in today's time. Basically, the yamas tell you where you should not allow your energy to flow excessively, and niyamas tell you where you should direct your energy more, so that it is conducive for you to travel onto the higher steps of yoga. So therefore, yoga focuses on the mind, uses the social conduct in terms of yamas and niyamas, bodily postures, breath regulation, sense organ control, focusing and defocusing of the mind, dharana and dhyana. All the 8 limbs of yoga aim at calming down of the mind. WHO defines health as the well-being at physical, mental, social and spiritual level. And here we see Patanjali 4,000 years ago is able to devise the 8 limbs of yoga, which exactly balance the domains of health prescribed by WHO. Yama and niyama for the social well-being, asana pranayama for physical well-being, pranayama and dharana for mental well-being, and dhyana and samadhi for spiritual well-being. Can you believe it, that our sages provide us such a comprehensive discipline that the World Health Organization recommends the dimensions of the health? This is the vision that Patanjali had. So finally, this is my slide where I want to conclude. All these domains of yoga have been researched. I talked to you about the psycho-neuro-immunological axis, hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis. Yoga has been shown to reduce cortisol, reduce norepinephrine, adrenaline. Yoga has been shown to enhance GABA levels. This famous study by Streeter et al., where one single session of yoga of 60 minutes, Iyengar yoga, was able to increase the GABA neurotransmitter in the thalamus of the brain of the practitioners. Single session of yoga, as compared to a walk for 60 minutes on a treadmill. A remarkable study. Now one really wonders, what is it inherent in the practice of yoga which a treadmill walk cannot give? You are walking on a treadmill fast, you are sweating, and you are performing yogasanas, the Iyengar yogasanas. GABA level is increasing significantly more by Iyengar yogasanas, but it is not increasing so significantly by a treadmill walk. So my question to you is, what is it that the yoga practice is adding which is not added by a treadmill walk? There is
So breathing
another
pattern.
Breathing pattern.
So
Yes.
breathing pattern.
And breathing is very intimately connected to the mind. Chale vate chale chittam, nischale nischchalam bhavet. A person who walks on a treadmill will keep thinking about the whole world. He will mechanically walk. But when a person does yoga, he has to remain attentive of the stretch on his body. His attention should be on a particular point of the body. He should be completely mindful of his body. He should remain aware of the breath. He should relax in that position. He should expand his consciousness in that position. Sthiram sukham asanam, prayatna shaithilyam, ananta samapatibhyam. Mindfulness, relaxation, breath synchronization. This is the beauty of yoga. So if you are doing yoga like an exercise, you are not doing yoga. You are losing the very essence of yoga if you are doing it like a power yoga. And frankly speaking, scientifically speaking, you are also losing on various benefits which would be really good for your physiology, for your brain. Stress can literally burn the brain. People who are stressed, there is faster thinning of the cortex. Cortex becomes thinner. Hippocampus becomes thinner. Our research at Nimhan shows that the mindful yoga practice for 6 months could actually increase the thickness of hippocampus in elderly people. 6 months of yoga. Elderly, where naturally the brain shrinks. Yoga is not only stopping the natural shrinkage, it is increasing the size of the brain, of the elderly. You know, in Alzheimer's, the area of the brain which shrinks the most is the long-term memory area, hippocampus. You search in PubMed, yoga hippocampus Nimhans. You will get our paper where in 6 months, we showed an increase in the size of the hippocampus. 5 days a week, every day supervised session. No home practice. Every day supervised session for 6 months. Now there is no question of any bias. Images are there. Images are measuring the size of the brain areas. And those images have been published in the paper. And this GABA paper is not done by us. It is done by US fellow, University of California, San Francisco, Streeter et al. US fellow will never publish the studies on our Eastern yoga if there is no result. They will never give us any kind of fake data. So GABA increases by yoga, not by treadmill. Brain size increases more by yoga. BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor. Now this is a chemical that your brain needs if you want to utilize more and more brain areas. See, there is a big talk, no? We are only using 1% of our brain. There is a big talk that what happens if I am able to use my 100% of my brain. I would recommend all of you to see the movie Lucy, where systematically they have shown what happens when a person is utilizing 10%, 20%, 30%, 50%, 100% of the brain. And you will see in that movie various kind of vibhutis that are given in Vibhuti Padas of Patanjali that the lady has shown. She could read others' mind. She could control others with her eyes. She could become actually omnipresent at the end. So how yoga will do that? One chemical for that is BDNF. If your brain gets hurt, some neurons get damaged, the other neurons take over the function. This is known as neuroplasticity. Ability of any area of the brain to take over any function of the brain, because as compared to the previous belief where individual areas were important, now everybody knows that it is not the brain area, it is the brain networks. And any area of the brain can take over any network of the brain. This ability of the brain, neuroplasticity, is shown by the chemical known as BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This chemical goes down in people with depression, in people with schizophrenia, in people with Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis. Now we at Nimhans demonstrated that 12 weeks, it requires a dedicated practice. You cannot achieve it. 12 weeks, supervised yoga sessions, 1 hour per day. What are the main practices in all these things? Number 1, Surya Namaskar. At least performing 8 rounds of Surya Namaskar. Number 2, Bhastrika. Performing 20 strokes of Bhastrika with 30-second gap for 3 rounds. Gheranda Samhita, if you read 5th chapter, 77th shloka. 5th chapter, Gheranda Samhita, 77th shloka. Gheranda clearly tells 20 strokes of this practice done 3 times a day, person will never suffer from any disease in his life. 20 rounds of Bhastrika 3 times in a day. 20 sets each round. 3 times in a day, means 60 strokes 3 times a day. If you do, the person will never suffer from any disease in his life. Of course, it has to be done empty stomach, but Bhastrika is something which I every day do. Surya Namaskar is something which I every day do. Then most of these modules include Nadi Shuddhi Pranayama, and they include chanting of the sounds A and feeling the vibration in the chest, U feeling the vibration in the neck, and Ma feeling the vibration in the head region. I am telling you in a nutshell, if you are doing whatever practices, if you want these benefits, Surya Namaskara, at least 8 rounds. Bhastrika, 20 strokes, 30-second gap. Again 20 stroke, 30-second gap. Again 20 stroke, 30-second gap. Nadi Shuddhi and A, U, Ma chanting. Nadi Shuddhi for 5 to 6 minutes, 12 rounds. A, U, Ma chanting. A, U, Ma, feeling vibration on these 3 areas. 9 rounds each, and then A, U, Ma together 9 rounds. Total 27 rounds of chanting. A, U, Ma and separately and A, U, Ma together. And very important to have your focus on the vibrations of the sounds. And then you lie down in Shavasana and take a deep, deep rest and get up. If you really do it, it will not take more than 20 minutes. You're all already yoga practitioners. Please add these practices. We have shown that not only in healthy, it is in depressed people that BDNF rose up after 12 weeks of practice. Definitely, number of studies now show that yoga enhances the CD4 count, it enhances antibody titers. There was a study showing that yoga enhances antibody titers. The meditation enhances antibody titers against influenza virus in 6 weeks. Similarly, there are studies showing that there is activation of different kind of areas with different kind of yoga practices. This area of the brain is known as the prefrontal cortex. This is the neocortex, which is only unique to the human beings. All other animals have all other areas of the brain, but this neocortex is only available for human beings. And the majority of the work that this particular area does is planning and impulse control. It sends inhibitory signals to the lower brain areas, which are known as the hippocampus and amygdala. So the inhibitory signal goes to the lower brain areas, and PFC gets activated by performing Kapalabhati and Bhastrika. My research paper is available on PubMed. If you put high frequency yoga breathing, in PubMed, or if you just go to ResearchGate and put Hemant Bhargav, you can see all these papers there. So the activation of Kapalabhati of prefrontal cortex means that you are able to control your lower emotion centers better. The lower emotion center, which is known as the limbic cortex, which includes hippocampus and amygdala, it gets overactivated with negative emotions. When you are filled with rage, anger, jealousy, conflict, all kind of negative feelings, fear will activate amygdala and hippocampus. Our research at Nimban shows that when you chant Om or A, U, Ma, the lower brain areas, amygdala, hippocampus, become deactivated. They become calm. And the higher brain areas, these are the areas which get knocked off when you get drunk. When you drink, your PFC gets knocked off. Then your animal takes over your human behavior and you directly express your hippocampus and amygdala out. And that is why we become or do things which we regret later. But Kapalabhati strengthens the PFC. It gives you that momentary control over your behavior. There was a study on prisoners. It showed that most of the prisoners were actually very good men. It was only a moment of rage where they could not control their anger, which created the difference between their life, which is in prison now, or the life that would have been free. One moment is sufficient to change the life if there is no control over the emotions. So Kapalabhati and Bhastrika give you that one moment, that precious moment in your life by reducing your impulsivity, activating the prefrontal cortex. And then when you do Om chanting after that, fast breathing, it deactivates the calming centers, the limbic system. So yoga activates higher brain functions, deactivates lower brain functions, gives you better calming effect on negative emotions, and gives you better willpower to control. These breathing practices, a 10-year review shows that simple breathing practices of yoga were able to reduce craving for smoking by activating the PFC. So through these mechanisms, through increasing the vagal tone, yoga is able to enhance parasympathetic activity, and ultimately all these effects have now on mental health translated into these proven effects of yoga. Yoga reduces depression, it reduces anxiety, it reduces negative symptoms of schizophrenia. So schizophrenia has two symptoms: positive, which means becoming aggressive, getting deluded, hearing voices. Negative symptoms means that they are not able to mingle socially. They are not able to feel emotions of others. They are not able to connect emotionally. They have emotional blunting. Those symptoms come down with yoga. They start mingling and connecting better. Yoga enhances your attention and processing speed in the mind. It enhances your ability to cognize things before doing them. It gives you better control over your behavior. It improves quality of sleep. It improves your attention span. Recent studies now show that yoga can be used as a monotherapy for mild to moderate depression. So yoga is now the first line treatment if you have mild to moderate depressive symptoms. You have to do Surya Namaskara, Kapalabhati, Bhastrika, Nadi Shuddhi, Aum chanting. Done. Depression can be taken care without using antidepressant, even if clinically you have mild to moderate level of depression. Only when it becomes severe, which is characterized by severe suicidal ideations, then you need a antidepressant support along with yoga. What are the early signs of depression? How do you know that you are getting depressed? There will be early morning awakening, after which you will not get sleep. You will lose interest in the things which you were previously enjoying. You will become slow in your activities. You will either gain too much of weight or you will lose too much of weight. You will either sleep too much lying down on the bed or you will not sleep at all. You will get palpitations. There will be excessive ideas of guilt. Past will dominate your mind. Depression is past. Excessive guilt. You will feel hopeless about future. If you are feeling all these kind of things in you, start yoga. Last message for my dear friends, for all of you is, please back up your knowledge with practice. Your words will never carry any value, whatever amount of information that you gain in your brain, if you do not yourself practice. So this is my request to all of you, that read about yoga, discuss about yoga, but give the foremost priority for daily practice of yoga. It will really change your life. It will really have an impact on your profession as a doctor. You will radiate a different kind of energy on your patients. And I'm telling you, your patients are not getting cured by your medicine, by your various advices. They are getting cured by your confidence level, by your positivity. And it cannot be gained by theory. It comes only through practice. So I wish all of you all the best. I pray for your health, happiness, and safety. I pray for your families. May all of you remain healthy, safe, and may all of you spread this positivity and knowledge of yoga. May all of you do yoga yourself and teach yoga to others around you in these difficult situations. May our nation, utilizing the power of youth like you, stand up as the world leader. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful and kind session, like informative. Too much information and that too the categorized one. So we can learn so good in a small session of 1 hour, sir. And we are looking forward for another sessions too.
Yes, if anybody has any quick questions, I would be happy to answer. Or you can mail me. If you have any questions, you can mail me on yogaforstress.nimhans. yogaforstress.nimhans@gmail.com. We have uploaded all these yoga sessions on YouTube with this email ID. There is a YouTube channel where you can access my other talks. Yoga. You can subscribe to that YouTube channel, yogaforstress.nimhans@gmail.com. Also, we have a website, www.nimhansyoga.in, where we keep uploading the information, our recent videos, our academic PPTs. So you can remain connected with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Sir,
Yes. Any questions?
so I
You can
have a
ask.
question.
Yes.
Is it possible for disabled people to do Bhastrika? Like they are 50 to 40% able to move their hands, but they are in neuropathic condition or due to some past surgery. So can they do it?
Can you tell me what condition the person has?
So right now the person is having diabetes and he is having neuropathy in the hands,
Okay.
along with AK spondylosis, cervical lordosis, and hypertension. But
Yeah.
I'm asking in general, can the person do if they're having disability?
So it is a very important question. What I feel here is that the person who has developed already some heart disease, okay, if there is a history of previous MI or there is a CABG, coronary artery disease is already there, or person is a known case of hypertension, then they should not do Bhastrika by raising the hands up. They should do it without raising the hands, like this. But if the cardiac health is good, then even a person with neuropathy should be able to do like this, up and down. Even if they don't feel the sensation of the hand, it will be good if they are moving hands up and down. It will enhance the microcirculation in the hands, which will be good for the neuropathy.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, yes.
Sir, my name is Kriti. I'm from Subharti College of Naturopathy and Yogic Sciences. Sir,
Yes.
as you have told that uh, if we are using the mobile phone, we are getting stimulus from different areas. So, sir, and then the cytokines and interleukins are increased, and the inflammatory disorders that is characterized in inflammatory disorders. Sir, I wanted to ask about the overthinking. That whenever someone is overthinking, that is also the same situation like inflammatory disorder.
Yeah, see, it is not the same as the radiations. If you want to protect yourself from radiation, you should use headphones. You should use a wired connection directly, rather than directly putting the phone on your ears. If it is little bit at a distance, at this much distance, a few centimeter distance, also the radiations become negligible for the brain. But you should never directly use the phone for a longer duration, or keep the phone below your pillow. Second question is, the overthinking, as I told you, that depression now is understood as a chronic inflammatory condition, and what a person does in depression is overthinking. So definitely, in thinking affects the immune system. It affects and releases more cortisol, which reduces the immunity. So overthinking can also generate harmful cytokines. So in both ways, it harms So we therefore have to use the yogic breathing techniques to reduce the speed of the mind. In that, the Kapalabhati and Bhastrika are very good techniques. And mobile phone independently, those radiations are causing its own effects because they are getting absorbed in the brain.
Okay, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes,
Sir, am I audible?
yes,
So my question is that you told us that there were two groups of students, uh, one who went for the holiday and one for who went for the examination, surprise examination.
yeah,
And you said that for 5 days, those who went for the holiday, they get more cases. They get number of cases
ah,
as compared to those who went for the surprise examination. So
yeah,
my question is to you that those who went for the holiday, there will be a secretion of endorphin hormone, that is happy hormone in them.
yeah,
So the suffering cases, this number of suffering cases should be low as compared to them.
yeah, yeah. You are Jayasvi,
So,
right?
Sir Janvi Mishra.
Janvi, Janvi. Okay, okay. Yeah, you have completed your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So the mechanism that that has worked there is that the people who went for a holiday, they definitely would have felt more positive, and therefore those among them who could sustain the virus, they could sustain, and some of them got infected. Okay, and they showed the symptom. So not everybody will show the same thing. Here, people in the exam group, they started utilizing all their resources that are available. So their immune system got highly activated because it was a situation for them where they had to face the demanding situation. And it is now proven with stress that when a stress is short-lived, you are able to face the stress with greater resources. But when it sustains for a long time, then you get compromised. You would have seen in your day-to-day life also that, say for example, if there is a marriage, the parents are working really hard for their daughter's marriage and they are working day and night. Nothing will happen to them till the marriage happens. And the day the marriage is over, from next day they will fall in. Correct? So what
Yes,
happens
sir.
is
Yes, sir.
that in those situations, immediately after the exams, these people felt relieved that the exam is over. Okay. Whereas those people who went to holiday, they did not have any such activating kind of stimuli for them. They were already relaxed. But people who got overactivated during examination, they had a rebound lowering of their immune system later on. So, virus is such an organism, it can remain on the linings and it can again get activated when the immune system goes down. So, the message that I wanted to give you through that study is that if a stressor that is for a short time, you can undergo without compromising your immunity, but your immunity will get compromised once that stressor goes away. Whereas when you are relaxed, then few people only may get the infection, but they will not have chronic consequences, or later on they will not get that immunity falling down.
Yes, sir. Understood, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Good evening, sir. Myself, Dr. Tarima.
Yes.
Sir, I have a doubt that breathing practices, especially Bastrika or Kapalabhati, it activates our system, sir. So, what is the link between these practices and anxiety? Can we practice these practices during anxiety condition also?
Your Tarika?
Tarima.
Tarima, I am really impressed with your question. So there is a paper that shows that hyperventilation can trigger an anxiety attack, can sustain an anxiety attack, and can cause a panic attack. Okay. So when a person is a known case of panic anxiety disorder diagnosed by a psychiatrist, okay, person gets panic attacks, then they should avoid both Kapalabhati as well as Bhastrika. But if it is a anxious personality, there are anxious personalities, no? There are in every batch there are people who are so sincere. Slightest thing you do, they will be on their toes, they will be jumping, they will really worry a lot about small issues. So those kind of personalities, when they do, there is activation of the sympathetic nervous system when you do it. But followed by that practice, the rest that you feel, the calming that you feel in the mind is much more beneficial than that momentary excitation. So it is actually beneficial if there is no diagnosed case of panic anxiety.
So we should practice with slow breathing technique also, like relaxation also maintained with these practices.
Yes, it is important that you give a sufficient gap between the practices, 30 seconds to 1 minute after each round. And after those practices, you perform Nadi Shuddhi or Anulom Vilom and then Aum chants.
Thank you so much, sir.
I think, sir, everyone has
Yes,
asked.
I think we have answered all the questions.
So, thank you so much, sir, on coming this small virtual platform. Thank you so much, sir. And this was a wonderful session. The comment session in chat box you can go through once.
Yes. So I am also really happy to participate and be with my BNYS friends. I'm thankful to you all, and please feel free if you feel that there is any such platform where I can be with you. I would be happy to connect with you again.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. We will be hoping you to connect once more in a week, wherever you'll schedule a time for us. Thank you
Bye.
so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste, sir. Hari Om.
Namaste. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending this session.